Hi everyone, Teri Wellbrock, host of the Healing Place podcast. Just a quick little message before today's interview. Wonderful conversation coming up. Just wanted to talk again about the hiatus for March. Even though I only put out, I think, one episode, maybe two, everyone still continued to tune in. So thank you. Big hugs to all of you who are fans of the show and listening in. I really do appreciate it. And thanks for inviting others to join and listen. Thank you so much. My mom, for those who haven't listened to previous episodes and are just tuning into this one, my mom passed away on my birthday, March 14th. And I think I talked about it last week in last week's episode, but I'm going to talk about it again because it was so powerful. My sister had run to her place, which was close by the hospice facility where my mom had been for a few weeks. And I had been sleeping on a couch bedside for 12 nights and staying with her around the clock. My sister had to work, and so she would run to work, but then she'd come in the evenings and we'd hang out and laugh and play cards and sing songs to our mom. And as she started to fade into no longer being conscious, we know she was still listening to us laugh because she'd flutter her eyes and make movements and would squeeze our hands when we would talk to her. So my sister had run home to get my birthday gift and a happy birthday banner. And within 20 seconds of Katie walking back into the hospice room, my mom passed. But it was those last moments that will stick with me forever. And I think I want to share with you what I said for her eulogy. I said it from the heart, but then someone asked me, that one of her friends that was struggling with her hearing asked me if I would type it up. So I typed it up as best I could from memory. So I'm going to share that with you in just a second. But what I wanted to share before I share that is my mom's final smile. So she hadn't opened her eyes. She hadn't communicated with words in 4 days. I think it was a blur, but it was at least 4 days. And when my sister walked back in the room and started to hang up the happy birthday banner, I turned around because Mom took a huge breath in, and Katie stopped, and we were staring at her, and this smile lit up not just her face, her entire being. And even though she wasn't moving, it was as if I could see her arms outstretched to whoever was there waiting for her. And then she released her breath and she was gone. And so to me, I think that to me just was so powerful and filled with incredible hope that in those final moments that we can be greeted by such joy and peace, and to just bring out this smile of just pure radiance. Again, what a gift for my mom, and to know that she passed with that smile on her face, and for us to be there with her and witness to it. Just a beautiful transition. So, all right, let me read you what I wrote for her eulogy. Here's the eulogy that I wrote. For those who don't know me, I am Joanne's oldest daughter, Teri. I could stand up here and talk to you about things you probably already know about Joanne. How she was a phenomenal cook who loved making vats of delicious soup for her friends and neighbors. And how she would cater right-to-life banquets, chopping up vegetables with my dad and sister in their tiny little apartment kitchen. Or tell you about her generosity, the beautiful way she made others feel valued and loved. My sister and I had bought her a red wool coat for Christmas one year, back in our early 20s. I noticed a few months later that she was wearing her old tattered coat, so I asked her, "Mom, where's your new coat?" She then explained, "Well, I was coming out of the Mount Washington Library and I saw a young girl, a teenager, waiting at the bus stop and she was shivering. So I asked her, 'Where's your coat?' And she responded, 'I don't have a coat.' So I gave her mine." My response was, "Mom, I can't believe you gave your coat away." I wasn't quite ready for the lesson she was teaching me at the time, and that even when you don't have much yourself, you can find joy in giving to others. She had a smile that could light up a room and didn't know a stranger. She made everyone feel valued and seen. Her smile was contagious. Then there's her beautiful grandkids and great-grandkids. I'm sure if you've ever been to her apartment, she's shown you the photos and told you all about those 9 kiddos, repeatedly. Oh, and those jokes. I've heard the same joke 2,000 times and still can't remember the punchlines. She was renowned for her jokes. Even Father King, upon giving her the last rites, said, "I fully expected you to sit up and tell me a joke, Joanne." Mom had not been conscious for a few days at that point. But I actually want to talk to you about some things you might not know about my mom. I host an international podcast on hope and healing, now in 125 countries around the world and in the top 2% globally. My mom joined me as a guest on the show twice. She talked about her struggles, addiction, our codependent relationship, the crosses she carried. She had said to me, "Teri, we need to talk about this so we can help others heal." My mom gave up drinking in her early 80s, and it was a daily struggle for her over those 2.5 years she lived sober. She was my hero, and I talked often on my show about the courage and strength it took for her to return to her darkness in order to start healing her childhood wounds. She and I worked together on healing our own mother-daughter relationship and blossomed a beautiful friendship in the process. I always thought it was my Grandma Kitty who taught me about resilience. In hindsight, I can see it was my mom who taught me so much about never giving up, how to stand back up no matter how many times life knocks you down, to face life with an empowering faith, to approach it with feistiness, grit, and determination, and to do it all with love and joy in your heart. On March 14th, my birthday, my mom left this life. My sister had run home to retrieve my birthday gift and a happy birthday banner. She said, "Call me if anything changes and I'll turn around." Mom's breathing had been shallow for days and we were starting to see a shift. After Katie left, the hospice chaplain Anthony came into our room and offered to say a prayer for Mom. I stood to one side of the bed and he was on the other. He placed his hand on Mom's head and said a beautiful prayer for her as tears fell from my eyes. Within moments of him leaving the room, my sister returned. She handed me my gift, then started to hang the banner over Mom's head. She had attached the happy part and had walked around the bed to hang the other half, while I had turned to place my gift on the dresser behind me. Suddenly, we both froze and turned to look at Mom, who had taken an enormous breath in. I pointed at our mom and exclaimed, "She's smiling! She's smiling!" Her face was lit up with the most radiant smile, and even though she was not physically moving and had not been conscious for several days, it was as if I could see her arms outstretched, her smile beaming with a look of, "Oh, there you are." And I'm not sure if she saw my dad, an angel, heaven's gates, or Jesus himself, but she was witnessing something glorious. Later that evening, I said to her in prayer, "Mom, I'll give you dying on my birthday, because that was the most magnificent gift you ever could have given me, and it will forever live in my heart and soul." Katie had dropped the banner and it left the word happy dangling over our mom's head. I want to end with a joke from my mom for all of you. When I flew in from South Carolina on March 2nd and was sitting alone with my mom, I asked her, "Do you have any message you want to share with everyone?" as I held my phone up to record her. She said, "I do." Then she proceeded to tell me a joke for all of you. "Teri, I am not afraid of dying. I just don't want to be there when it happens." Then she giggled that adorable laugh of hers. I love you, Mom. Welcome, everybody, to the Healing Place podcast. I'm your host, Teri Wellbrock, and very excited to have with me today Adam Sharon. And he has studied and worked in the field of Chinese medicine for, I think, like 20 plus years, is what we had conversed about. But I love it that he has a focus on releasing the binds of trauma. As a quick reminder, before I officially welcome Adam, this Healers of Hilton Head special series is focusing on those who work in the healing arena and offer guidance in the healing arena in the Lowcountry, Hilton Head, Bluffton, Beaufort area. But even if you're listening wherever you are in the world, New Zealand or Germany or Japan, look within your own communities and you will find an amazing collection of healers, of those offering healing resources. Yeah, so even in this tiny little low country area, oh my gosh, there's just so many beautiful souls doing incredible work. So with that said, welcome, Adam.
Hi, nice to be here with you.
Yes,
Looking forward to
yes.
this.
Well, we just had a little chat beforehand and I should have hit record for all the awesome stuff we talked about. So yeah, so
Hindsight, sure.
talk to me about, well, one, how you got into Chinese medicine. I'm fascinated by it. And I just want to say, I haven't had anybody on here talking about it.
Sure. Well, my relationship with Chinese medicine goes back a little over 20 years. And it's definitely, it's been, and it is one of the most wonderful relationships in my life. Very, very fortunate to have crossed paths with it. Let's see, around 2001, it's funny, it kind of, I'll never forget the way it kind of hit me. I'm from New York, the New York City kind of suburban area. I was born in New York City and then raised a little bit north of that. And around 2001, I was hanging out in New York, and I was really young and kind of exploring different things, not really ready to think about like a career yet. I was doing little temp jobs and running a little business and just kind of enjoying myself and testing the waters. And kind of out of nowhere, I found myself like over the course of like a day or two, just all of a sudden very interested to reach out and get an acupuncture session. And I don't really know what spurred it on. It wasn't that, I wasn't in pain, pardon me, or it wasn't like, I've been getting horrible migraine headaches and someone recommended acupuncture. It was just, there wasn't really anything. I mean, health was fine. Everything was okay. It was just all of a sudden this curious drive. So I made a few phone calls and I found this wonderful practitioner. We've actually been friends ever since. And I went and I said, hey, first time, can we do something? And she invited me in. And, I remember feeling, oh, God, this is interesting. We did, she did the intake. She looked at my tongue and she felt my pulses. And the things that she said were that first indication that, wow, this is a different paradigm completely. Because I've never quite gone to a Western trained doctor and, had them say these things. Of course, it wasn't their language to speak, but, walk into the doctor and they if they're going to look, say, they'll look at your tongue or they'll, whatever, they might feel your pulse rate or stuff like that. But I could tell that when she was doing her traditional diagnostics, I could just sense that she was looking for different pieces of information, and she was finding them. And so she said, okay, all right, we could work on this over here, or, this isn't flowing so well. We could work on, and it became very clear that the standard, or the way that this information was interpreted, the standard of health was different. Because you'll walk into a doctor's office and they'll be like, seem fine to me. Everything's okay. All the blood work comes back normal and your physical exam checked out and you're good. You're healthy. and they'll slap a label of healthy on you. And how often does it happen where people will go into a conventional doctor's office and they'll leave with that, everything's fine, I don't see anything wrong with you, you're perfectly healthy, and they know that they're not.
Right.
And they know that there's something wrong. They know they don't feel well. But because the diagnostics and everything checks out within that paradigm, they're told by an authority figure, a medical authority, that they're okay. And, that could be really, really hurtful sometimes, and very dismissive, especially when you're not well.
Well, yeah, because you start to say, oh, it's all in my head.
Right. And sometimes, you hear stories where someone says, oh, it's all in your head, or it's just stress. And then we have this deeper, more intimate relationship with these aspects of our being, and we know that's not, we know that that's not exactly what's going on. So it was a very interesting session, with this acupuncturist, back in 2001, where I left going, okay, she wasn't calling me sick, but maybe I'm not as totally healthy as I think I am, or maybe there's some cool stuff to work on. And if we worked on it through this different kind of paradigm, maybe I might feel even better than I kind of currently feel. So it was that initial session, those initial sessions, that was what opened me up to Chinese medicine as a completely different, health and wellness and medical paradigm. It took a couple of years. It took a few more years. She said at one point, when I expressed to her that I was curious in acupuncture, she sent me home with a couple of needles. I'll never forget this. She's like, look, I'm not going to do this for everyone, but here, go home and take a couple needles and just practice putting them in your leg, and, report back to me next week. So here I was, untrained, didn't really know. And she kind of gave me a rough idea of where they're supposed to go and how. And I remember going home and just sitting outside, tapping needles into my skin, but it was an initial foray into the art and craft of it all.
Yeah.
It was fun.
Beautiful. Yeah, right. And now, did you end up opening like your own acupuncture studio and pursuing it on a path?
I did. It took a few years, and I kind of was comfortable doing a lot of independent study for about 3 years. Like, I would just kind of surround myself with a bunch of books, classic books that we read here in the West, to kind of start to get familiar with the language, yin and yang. It's, of course, you start off reading books by other Westerners, right? I mean, Westerners who have then translated the language of Chinese medicine into English and have taken these concepts, yin and yang and the 5 elements, and these, different things like heat and, yin deficiency and qi and blood and these things. These are concepts first and foremost, right? And so, conceptually is how we kind of begin to start relating to them. You discover very soon, hopefully thereafter, that they are obviously much more than concepts. They are the actual manifestations and expressions of the body through that paradigm, qi and blood and yin and yang and all these things, but I started reading about it and spending some time studying it all. And then in 2004, by that point, I was ready to enter a kind of more formal program. So I ended up going to a well-known school in New York City and started on the path of, getting the acupuncture degree, kind of matriculating, so to speak. And, by that point I was ready to do it. And, once you take the step and enroll in school, then wow, then obviously, it's quite a dramatic shift from a kind of an independent, very loose self-study to like, all right, now you've got 3 hours of, yin and yang class from, 9 to 12, 5 days a week. And you're in school for several years. And as you advance through the ranks and everything, you start working in the student clinic, right? And, by the time you're done. As they say, there's a popular phrase, like, it's when you graduate from acupuncture school that's when the real education begins,
Right.
but by the time you graduate, you're definitely ready to kind of hang your shingle up and start doing your work there in the world. So, so for many years, that's what I did. Yeah.
Wonderful. Now, I think in one of our conversations we had that you had studied under a Taoist priest. Is that correct?
Yes. Chinese medicine education in the West is an interesting topic in and of itself, because Chinese medicine dates back like prehistorically. It's really hard to almost relate with how old it goes back. I mean, even just Chinese culture and Chinese civilization. I mean, there are cultures that have existed, that have come and gone here, in the world, that are not intact really anymore. I think about, the Aztec culture, the Mayan culture, or even like, Celtic culture, over in the British Isles and stuff like that. These cultures have kind of seen their ascendancy. You think of like Rome, like it was a time when that was it in term, on the world stage, but it's not like that anymore. So Chinese culture is kind of interesting because, they have been around for an incredibly long time, as we understand. I mean, our United States, like, we're just like on the cusp of 250 years old, right? Or whatever it is, as a culture, right? Like, or whatever it is. I mean, 1776. And, but like, you go back into Chinese history, and, it goes back, before things were documented, and so there's this idea that Chinese medicine probably goes back into shamanic times, well before it was ever codified, and before it was ever, things were ever written down. So you have this history, and then at one point, you had this religion, Taoism, right? And then and that took a while to start to formulate. And so eventually, the point that I'm getting at is that the Chinese medicine that we are taught here in the West today is a very modernized, codified version of it. Because in other words, when you have a medicine that's that old, and that spans across, just really millennia, right? I mean, it just goes across thousands and thousands of years. That's not something that can be neatly contained, right? Or, neatly, like, I'm like, oh, this is what it is. You think about our Western medicine. I mean, it changes now every 5 to 10 years with some new drug development, some new technological advancement, some new discovery of some new part of the body based on, new genetic testing or a new scan or something like that. It's very technologically driven. So Chinese medicine is not that. It's philosophically driven, right? So the Chinese medicine that is mostly available to Westerners, here in America and in, let's say, Europe and stuff like that, stems from something called TCM, traditional Chinese medicine. And that is a codified, systematized version of the medicine that really kind of came about during the Communist Revolution in China. And it gets kind of political, where like the Communist Chinese ruling government wanted to take the medicine and do something with it where it could almost be like exported, right? Where it could be something where, like Western medicine, you can go into another country, you can start to almost like, exchange it. It becomes something. And they wanted, there was a push to make the country more literate. They wanted to kind of make it more forward moving and thinking and everything like that. So they took a lot of the main medical concepts, and that's what they kind of devised. And and then they started the teaching colleges in Beijing, and it became something very specific. Whereas for thousands and thousands of years, it was not that. It was apprenticeships. You would study with your father, who had studied with his father, who had studied with their, like lineages of people, and they were different things, different medicines, versions of it would be practiced in different regions. They practiced different herbal medicine in the South than they did in the North and over in the mountains. So so what we had available to us in the West is something, it has, there, we don't do apprenticeships here anymore. So you go to a school and you learn the stuff that they set you up to learn. And that comes from modern China. I was lucky to cross paths with an individual, wonderful guy, wonderful teacher, who came from a religious Taoist lineage that goes back about 2,500 years to Huashan, Hua Mountain, this sacred Taoist mountain in the middle of China. And, he came from a specific, his particular life story is very interesting. He was ordained in the Taoist priesthood when he was only 16 years old, and he had actually, started actually practicing and studying Chinese medicine when he was like as young as 4. So, it was like one of these almost kind of like mythical characters where, he had been adopted by an older Taoist priest who had seen a vision in a dream, like I'm supposed to hook up with this guy and kind of adopt him and take him in and teach him from when he was a child, and and then he'll go on and teach all these Americans and these Europeans. And that's kind of what's happened. So I connected with this guy. He was teaching at a school in New York City, of all places, so it was easy to run into him. And I started studying at his school, and that was cool. That was because he wasn't teaching just the TCM, traditional Chinese medicine. He made it very clear that what he was teaching had its roots in stuff that was, a couple thousand years older. So that was nice because, because it exposes you to something completely different, right? And he would teach in from a very spiritual place. Deeply, deeply philosophical. So it just opened up the doors. And of course, it was an enormous influence on what the relationship that I ended up forming with the medicine.
Yeah. Now, when you talk about the binds of trauma and helping release that, was that something that you learned through that, or is that something you incorporated into your own practice?
Well, I definitely learned it through this through a lot of these Taoist teachings, because we were learning sometimes, again, very specific techniques to assist someone with that sort of thing. Again, the trauma stuff gets a little lost in the modern teachings. They don't really get so much into it. In other words, like, you think of like acupuncture practice, like modern day acupuncture, great for sports medicine, and, okay, good, cool for migraines, and let's work with digestion. But trauma stuff doesn't really come up in, modern acupuncture teachings so much. So he was teaching us specific protocols at times that could be used for trauma work specifically. And that was a really, really interesting track. And so, for example, there is a treatment, an acupuncture protocol called the 13 ghost points. And sometimes it's called the 13, and you can Google this, right? The 13 ghost points of Sun Simao. And Sun Simiao was one of the most famous Chinese medicine practitioners, from antiquity. Exactly when he lived and had his career escapes me at the moment, but it was a while back. No, we're not talking 3,000 years ago, more like 1,500, between 1,500 and 2,000 years, something around that time. But he was one of the kind of, he was really, just one of the biggest Chinese medicine practitioners of all time. There's a few of them that kind of just reign supreme, whose works are still very much studied and valued and everything like that. So Sun Simiao, and he may not have invented the ghost point treatments. It may have been something that was handed down to him at, when he was studying. It may have been something that was handed down to him from shamanic times, even like, prehistoric stuff. It may have just been something that had existed. But he took it and he kind of developed it, and then it became something associated with his name. So the 13 ghost points of Sun Simiao, what they essentially are 13 acupuncture points that exist everywhere from the crown of the head all the way to the feet, that historically, traditionally, would be called upon to help a person work through varying stages of demonic possession. Okay, now that's not something that we deal with here in modern medicine and stuff like that, but in old times, that was a very real thing. So they would talk about, like, if a person had, been in a way like invaded by a ghost. The Chinese word for ghost was gui, right? So having a gui, and when you look at the kind of the traditional teachings of when you're learning the ghost points, what happens, and you can look at these things and go, wow, like it's describing different stages of mental illness, right? In other words, it looks very similar. The symptoms look very similar to things like what we today think of as like schizophrenia or PTSD, right? Or bipolar or manic depression, right? And the things that the varying signs and symptoms that go along with that, mood disorders or insomnia, right? Or different manifestations of language, or if a person is in one aspect of their personality and then they shift to another one, and things like schizophrenia and those presentations. But one of the things that we were using them for, and that I got a chance to work with up close, this was at a clinic up in Massachusetts when I was, based up north, was using these ghost points and similar treatments to help really unhook trauma. And that was like the modern correlation for what to do with these ghost points. Sometimes, like, it gets, the lines get very blurry. Someone comes in and, they're describing something and they're dealing with some kind of trauma. But in the context of ghost points, you'd say, well, they caught a ghost. A ghost got in there somehow, or, if you think about a ghost gets into us and it kind of starts to take up residence, right? And there are different phases of ghost infestation, and the way that it can start to shift our personality, or it begins to alter our own self-image, how we see ourselves, how we are engaging with the world, with people, loved ones might say, in the past couple months, I've noticed that so-and-so has changed. They seem different now, right? The same way trauma can begin to change our personality, in other words, like, these things come in and they absolutely have an effect on our personality, on our psychology. And so ghost points, we were using, use those a lot in terms of trauma, and unconventional, sure, but it can be a very, very, very effective treatment. It's definitely a little bit more on the esoteric side, but the ghost points, very, very powerful. I've had them done on me, and I've worked, you know, with people, giving them to people as well. Powerful stuff.
Powerful. I mean, wow. As you spoke, it so resonated with me. And one of the things that popped in my head was, which I've talked again about on the show over the past 5 years, but I had been involved, one of my many traumas in my first 22 years of life, it been involved in 2 bank robberies. And one, a gun was held to my head. My coworker was stabbed 3 times with a hunting knife. They didn't catch the assailants, and then they returned 3 months later to rob our main office where I had just moved. Only this time, the man who had held the gun to my head pulled the trigger and murdered my coworker. So where I'm going to with this is, when I discovered, I had gotten a hold of the prison system because I kept tabs on him to check him out every now and then, make sure he was still in prison.
Yeah.
And I couldn't find him in the system. And so I got a hold of the prison, and they told me, oh yeah, he died 2 weeks ago of natural causes in his cell. And as they told me those words, I felt a darkness like pass through my body and out the window, right? And as you spoke, I was like, oh my God, that was like it was almost like this dark ghost that I had been carrying around in my body. Not necessarily him, but just the impact of his choices and how it impacted my life and the weight that I carry. And I literally felt a weight lift from my being. Now, I fell to my knees and cried and, just released him in love and forgiveness. But that was from my own journey. But wow, really powerful and resonated with me. Thanks for that.
Oh, yeah. And that's quite a experience, and I'm obviously sorry about, I know it was, a long time ago, but anytime that, I mean, my teacher used to say, there's no hierarchy to trauma. In other words, like, the effect can be the same. These really, really, really horrible and crazy life experiences, but again, like the way that they get in, the nature of them is to, they get in and they hook into us like a ghost. And so, that was very moving when you said, like, you found out about his passing, and then it was, almost like a piece of his ghost that had been hanging on with you, just was now free to, and yeah, I mean, that's how it works.
Yeah. Oh, that's what I said. As you spoke, like that's what just came to me. And it was almost like I got this message from him that said, you're free now. Like it was like him letting me go as well as me letting him go. This this earthly connection we had through those 2 events, and the subsequent trials and so forth. So yeah, really, really powerful, Adam. Thank you for that.
Sure. Yeah. It can be rough stuff, which is why it's good to be able to discuss it, and it's good to bring light to it. I mean, that's essentially all we can do. Ghosts, they live in a very dark, almost, say like a yin, a yin and yang, right? Yang being very, light filled. Yin can be a very dark place. And so ghosts, that's kind of where they have their home. And so, as but as you said, the idea of, you letting his ghost go, and ghost letting you go, to return to that place of light again, to make that transition from this very darkened yin kind of environment to a place, that is filled with light and with love and with freedom. Because the thing about ghosts that we learned in doing this work is that the key is we can't move on. The nature of ghosts is that they are stuck. They can't move on. They don't want to move on. It's very much like you see portrayed sometimes in movies here, like The Sixth Sense, or, these movies that portray these ghosts, that they're here and they're still hanging around these realms because they've got some unfinished business, and something happened. Something was maybe taken from them at the moment of death very fast, or, something just happened. And so it's the same thing that happens with our trauma here, is that, a lot of this stuff is, healing is very much based on the resolution of what is unfinished and what is unresolved. And that can be as simple as a physical ailment that we're trying to treat or effectively cure. Some lifelong physical affliction that's been with us, or, getting over a case of COVID, right? Or something like that, or something much deeper. But usually healing is a process and a journey of going from something that is unfinished and unresolved, by, where we are not free, to making that move to now we are free and something has been resolved. And because of that, now we are free to go on our way. Our souls are free to go on our way. And if that, and for ghosts, literally, that usually means leaving this earthly realm and just continuing on their journey. And for those of us, though, that are here in, human bodies and dealing with something like trauma, it's resolving that. And then our hearts can now, and our spirits can be free to now enjoy the rest of our earthly life, before we have to go on and keep traveling.
Yes. Oh, gosh, you're so speaking to me. You teared me up for just a second, too, because very, very powerful truths in everything you're speaking. Again, bringing it back to me for just a second, because I resonate with it. So I had done all this trauma healing work, right, from these horrible traumas throughout my childhood and early years. And life seemed to be going along just great. Moved to Hilton Head Island. Life is wonderful. I feel so healed and wonderful. Within months of moving into this house, I started to say, I feel poisoned. I feel poisoned. When you talked about the tongue earlier, look at the tongue. I would wake up every morning. Why is my tongue yellow? Why am I so sick? What is going on? Going to doctors and specialists, and nobody could figure out what was going on. Even though, like you said, I was like, something is wrong with me. Like, I cannot tell you other than I feel poisoned. Got to a nutritionist who said, Teri, I think you might have some mold toxicity going on. You should check your house. And I was like, our house? It's a beautifully rehabbed house. It's gorgeous. Why did they rehab it? I was like, oh my gosh. So we did testing on the house, high levels of aspergillus, did testing on my body, high levels of ochratoxin A and citrulline, which comes from aspergillus. So I went on this now coming on 2-year physical journey. And it was like what I needed to finally face the last of those traumas that I hadn't processed, the last of those things. So it was like the universe, God, however you look at it, took me to that next level. Like, all right, you've done all this healing work and we still have some more to do. And so to me, I looked at it as such a gift because I was able to do even more healing work, not just to my physical body, but then on that trauma level. So again, what you're talking about is so resonating with me. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It makes me think, like, this idea of things that linger, right? Mold, and it can be stubborn, and it lingers, it hangs around, and mold is, it's a very yin type of pathology. It thrives off of dampness and in dark places. And, in other words, like, you think of, these certain whatever substances and, just aspects of life, but they've got this lingering component to it. And yeah, sometimes, and like, yeah, they show up in our lives and they're calling us to go sometimes deeper. Like, it's kind of like, all right, okay, there's more work to do.
Yes.
And that's, we don't get off the hook sometimes
I
until we do it
know.
off.
I was like, I'm in beautiful Hilton Head Island, dream come true. And wait, what? I'm so sick, like deathly ill here. What is happening? Good news, just to share for everybody. 2 weeks ago, I got my mycotoxin report back, our third round, and all the mycotoxins are back in the normal range. So all the detoxing work, all the hard work I've done on just a physical soul, the whole holistic level, has paid off.
Congratulations.
Thanks. And it didn't
Yeah.
include acupuncture. I mean, that was part of, I brought in so many, from sound bowls and sound healing and harmonic eggs. And I mean, I did so much healing work. But so yeah, the gift of acupuncture has been wonderful, and herbal medicine. So yeah.
With these things, sometimes we have to be prepared to throw the kitchen sink at it, and we
Yeah.
have to be prepared to go outside the box. We have to be prepared to, attack it conventionally, unconventionally, from the left, from the right, from up, from down. It is, we encounter these situations. They are not times to be closed-minded as to how we, want to approach something, as to how we maybe feel called to do it. So, kudos to you. That's wonderful. You resolved, what was outstanding. Like, in other words, put a check next to it now. That is finished business. And
Yes.
yeah, it's a good thing.
Right. Well, oh my gosh, this has been such a gift to talk to you today. I know you're new to the Lowcountry area, and so how do folks connect with you? How do they reach out to you?
Um, Drop me an email. Probably the most reliable way. Um, I'll read it all. I'll respond. I'm not going to put that disclaimer there. Like, I receive so many emails these days that, I'll have my assistant look at the most important
Right.
ones. And we'll decide which ones to get back to. No, no, I'd love to hear from anybody that feels inclined or inspired to reach out. And, you know, so yeah, my email, and that's my name, Adam Sharon, ADAMSHARON, and the number is 00901 at gmail.com. So Adam Sharon 00901 at Gmail. Yeah, that's it. Pretty straightforward. I'm pretty under the radar
Awesome.
with a lot of this stuff these days. So, hopefully not making it too difficult to be found. But yeah, that would be fine. It would be good. It'd be good to hear
Wonderful.
from anyone that feels like they want to get in touch. Sure.
All right. Any final thoughts to share? Anything you wanted to touch upon that we didn't have a chance to?
The healing dialogue, right? Like this kind of a conversation, any kind of a conversation that has health, and that has healing, and that has an ever expanding and ever deeper understanding of wellness at its core, is just one that I always just want to encourage people to keep having. It's a crazy world. We can't always, there's so much that we're not in control of, you know, um, but this is something that we can all do for ourselves. Some might say that this is the work here that we're constantly being called to do for ourselves, to deeper our sense of self-awareness as it relates to our own healing, and our own health and wellness journeys and stuff like that. But this is really what, it's one of the ways that it keeps the light kind of flowing around and bouncing back and forth off, each other. And so, yeah, that's just, it's my favorite conversation to have,
Yes. Well, you and I
so,
chatted before we hit record and said so many of our conversations are, eventually end up in about healing, or they come in about healing. And I think once you step onto that healing journey, and you just radiate. You're right. You just radiate that light of healing, and pulls others in. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
beautiful. All right. Well, again, thank you so much for, gosh, the gift that you've given me, the audience, and sharing your wisdom.
Sure. And thank you. It was a pleasure. And I'm really, really glad that we had a chance to do this.
Awesome. All right. Well, everyone, thanks for joining us today on the Healing Place podcast. And remember, until next time, be gentle with yourself. Thanks. Bye-bye. Hey, everybody. Teri Wellbrock again. Just wanted to thank you for listening to the episode today and remind you to visit my website as well as the academy.teriwellbrock.com for the courses. But if you go to my website, teriwellbrock.com, you can sign up for my monthly Hope for Healing newsletter, which is also jam-packed with information and strategies and blog pieces and guest blog pieces and links to shows. And just a great space for, again, healing. Thanks for, again, being here and being a part of this healing space. I very much appreciate you. All right. Bye-bye.